This is Dustin Baker on VikesNow, the Wednesday edition, June 1st, the first episode of June. And we were here yesterday talking about Dede Westbrook and the possibility of him rejoining Minnesota for a sequel. Nope. Instead, we're having the Albert Wilson chat. Dede Westbrook evidently held out on an offer because he thought he would get more offers from other teams, or he did get them. I'm not sure. So the Vikings pivoted and signed Albert Wilson to a 1-year, $1.12 million contract or $1.02 million contract, non-guaranteed money, which we'll talk about at the end of the show. I guess the big takeaway is that you now have a potential WR4, WR5 candidate in Wilson that will not be named Dede Westbrook, who was the incumbent punt returner from the 2021 season. So more change this offseason in a offseason that started from the top and kind of filtered to the bottom for change, but mostly just at the top with Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell. So Albert Wilson, in his career, he has played in 89 games, and he has grabbed 12 touchdowns and 2,499 yards. So a habitual WR3, WR4 type. He was an undrafted free agent from Georgia State to the Kansas City Chiefs in 2014. He was a quasi-weapon during the Alex Smith era. Do you remember the era of the Chiefs before Mahomes, when they had Vikings syndrome, where they'd always be pretty good, but not good enough to get to the big game? Yeah, that was when Wilson had his maiden voyage, led by the Alex Smith version of the Chiefs. And he was at the peak of his powers in 2017, which was the year before Mahomes formally took over. I think Mahomes started the final game of that season because they had playoff seeding all locked up. But in that year, 2017, the year that this team did really awesome shit, Wilson grabbed 554 yards and 3 touchdowns, which at the time was basically WR3 numbers, especially on a Chiefs team led by Alex Smith, who wasn't overly prolific, but was proficient and efficient. So that is the ceiling to date, is 500, 600 yards, 3 or 4 touchdowns for Wilson. So unless some career renaissance is happening before our eyes, which I doubt, Wilson is going to be a candidate for WR4, WR5. At the top, we already have Justin Jefferson, beyond the shadow of a doubt. Adam Thielen, who's widening things down with the purple team. And then KJ Osborne, who truly earned a WR3 gig. And it'll be exciting to see what he does to top that, especially with Irv Smith coming back, who's going to take a lot of his targets away, in my opinion. So if you stop watching right now, just know that Wilson is a fringe WR4, WR5 candidate for the Vikings. I'm going to talk about the crowded house at that spot all of a sudden here shortly. But the big news for some of us is that A.J. Rose was the casualty. Because I get way deep in the weeds in this shit, more so than I probably should. I thought about that last night. I was like, I wonder who will be cut. And you start skimming at all 90 guys. And they have that Kovac dude for running back, who I thought, maybe it'll be him. A.J. Rose played too well last year to be the guy, but nope. A.J. Rose was the roster casualty to make room for Wilson, and he was the dude that generated offense during the preseason last year when Clint Kubiak couldn't do a damn thing on offense. They handed the ball to A.J. Rose against the Chiefs, and bada bing, he scored a couple touchdowns. I think he had about 50 rushing yards. But now he doesn't work here anymore. So A.J. Rose is 24 years old. Last year was his rookie year, so he'll land somewhere. We'll see if it's better than a practice squad prognosis, but it's kind of like Kyle Slaughter in that sense, where folks are like, God, he looks so good, he's got to be the real deal. Well, they're playing against backup players, and if every other coach and general manager on the planet doesn't quite see it, then you kind of have to give these guys the benefit of the doubt. But for A.J. Rose, we shall see. He'll land somewhere. He's young enough. On the outlook for Albert Wilson, a certifiable veteran wide receiver, pretty fast, going to be 30, I believe, this summer in July. So he's getting up there in age, relatively speaking. But this, what we haven't had in years past, even at WR3, let alone WR4, which is what Wilson will audition for, is a crowded house. in years past, namely 2019, before Osborne came to the team, you'd have guys like B.C. Johnson, Chad Beebe, Brandon Zylstra, Dylan Mitchell auditioning for WR3. And then whoever won that, in that case, that year, 2019, it was B.C. Johnson. Then that guy would fill WR4 with Chad Beebe. But now it's different. And that's pretty cool. With Kevin O'Connell, you're actually getting candidates to try out for WR4 that you might consider mainstream or more akin to how the rest of the world does it. So we've put the WR3 conversation to bed because the theory is that KJ Osborne nailed that down sufficiently. So now the chats that you used to have, or the madness you used to spitball in your brain about why can't we find a WR3, now those auditions emulated WR4 because suddenly you have B.C. Johnson, who's coming back from a torn ACL. Then you have Jalen Naylor, who's a rookie, who Keenan McCardell pounded the table for during the draft. Paul Allen even said this guy could win WR3, and it's like looking around thinking, really? I don't know about that. Albert Wilson, of course, he just got signed. And then Amir Smith-Marset, who was probably considered the front runner for WR4. That's 4 guys for this crowded house at WR4, which is a cool problem to have because in yesteryear, during the Zimmer era, the WR4 was always some default guy who wouldn't be a part of any other team except for the Vikings. But if Amir Smith-Marset turns into something big, or Albert Wilson gets some targets, B.C. Johnson comes back from the ACL, or even Jalen Naylor is the rookie bust-out sensation, there are talents at the WR4 position that we're not used to because you just need not even give a shit about it. We'll find B.C. Johnson or Chad Beebe's WR3. Whoever falls in line in WR4 is fine. That's how we used to think. But with the new brains and Eagan, Minnesota, this is an example of having too many candidates for a relatively important WR4 spot. It's pretty neat. So the Wilson stuff, some of the fodder that I saw from the digital stratosphere and articles from Vikings territories competitors, just right out of the gate screamed Albert Wilson's going to play special teams, which will be fine, and I'll get on board with it, but he doesn't really do that professionally. I thought I was tripping because it was such a widespread conclusion that, oh yeah, they got Wilson to return punts. He's never returned a punt professionally, so this would be a brave new world at age 30 that he's taken on punt returns in the NFL. And then he has returned 4 kicks in his career, so I guess if that is the grand plan, then fine. He'll be doing something new if he becomes the special teams savant for the Vikings, because in his past 2 lives with the Chiefs and the Dolphins, it was just WR3, WR4 stuff. But I think where the special teams theories come from are Wilson's time at Georgia State. In the early 2010s, he was a jack of all trades there. He tabulated, what do we got here, 6,235 all-purpose yards at Georgia State. And yes, punt returns. Yes, kick returns. Yes, wide receiving. Yes, handoffs. But that's 10 years ago. He was making a name for himself doing all that cool shit 10 years ago. I can see where the Vikings would be intrigued by using him in the D.D. Westbrook role, but I just don't know that's a foregone conclusion, because why haven't these other teams done it? The Chiefs, Dolphins didn't read the scouting report? What's the deal here? So I fully understand where the idea comes from that bada bing, we have a special teams returner. But you've got Kene Nwangu to do the kick returns, which is the only thing for returning that Wilson has done professionally. And then there's a wide open, I guess, battle for punt returner now that D.D. Westbrook isn't coming back. So, yeah, I guess you'd say that Wilson might get a shot at it, but I'm just telling you that he hasn't returned punts in the NFL. So do with that information what you will. I think on the whole, it's a neat thing that Wilson signed, because it does indeed show that they're doing more than you're used to at WR4. We're coming off 8 years of not caring about WR4, so it's interesting to see what the big plan is once it's all said and done, top to bottom. How many wide receivers they bring into September? Probably 6 or 7. and then will Wilson make the cut? And that's the final thing I'll mention about Wilson is that his contract is non-guaranteed. So, in the day after he signs, everybody says, boom, we got our punt returner. He could be a very mundane roster cut here in 2 months, 2 or 3 months, because there's no guaranteed beef to keep him on the squad. But that is the Albert Wilson chat. You saw where Hakeem Hicks signed with the Buccaneers. That kind of dampened all of the 2.5-month-long rumors the Vikings had about being interested in him. Perhaps we'll do a show tomorrow about other candidates, a defensive tackle the Vikings could explore. Haven't nailed that in yet, but I did write about it on Vikings territory, so I got all the ideas kicking around in my head. But there you have it. Albert Wilson to the Vikings, previously a Chief and a Dolphin, will now vie for a WR4 spot with the purple team. Skol, baby.